getting to know each other even better. Katrina Kaufman in Minnesota, thank you so much. And that does it for today. We'll be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report with John Dickerson starts right now. Have a good one.
Welcome to the Daily Report for July 31st, 2024. I'm John Dickerson. Another day, another retaliatory strike against a key leader of Israel's enemies. A top Hamas voice killed in Iran as diplomats scramble to fight escalation. Donald Trump appears at the National Association of Black Journalists and tries to fact-check Vice President Harris on whether she's black or not. It does not go well. We'll have a report from the venue. The Fed decides not to cut rates, but the Fed chairman put a rate cut on the table for September. And we'll also have an update from Paris on the Olympics, an update on those stubborn forest fires. And remember that TikTok ban? What's happened with that? We'll update you on that too. And finally, when the planet is regularly setting high temperature records, it's good to be in the air conditioning business. The Daily Report starts in a moment. Hello, thank you for joining us. We begin our report with the assassination of the top political leader of Hamas. The militant group and Iran blame Israel. A Hamas spokesman says 62-year-old Ismail Haniyeh was hit by a rocket Wednesday in the home he had been staying in near Tehran, the Iranian capital. Israel has neither confirmed nor denied its role. Haniyeh became the militant group's chief in 2017. The U.S. named him a specially designated global terrorist in 2018 for, among other things, attacks against Israeli citizens. Also on Wednesday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu confirmed Israel killed a Hezbollah commander Tuesday in Beirut, Lebanon. The Israel Defense Forces claim the senior military leader had been responsible for a missile strike that killed 12 children who were playing soccer in the Golan Heights last Saturday. Since Hamas's October 7 attack on Israel, diplomats across the globe have feared that war will spread across the Middle East. Iran's supreme leader says Israel will be, quote, harshly punished for Haniyeh's assassination. And in his address to the Israeli people Wednesday, Netanyahu said, quote, "We are ready for any scenario. I am not giving in." For more on this, let's bring in CBS News foreign correspondent Deborah Pata, who is in East Jerusalem. Deborah, what more do we know about the assassination on Haniyeh?
Well, John, we know that it was bold and brazen. Haniyeh had been attending the inauguration of the new president of Iran. Hamas says a missile struck the house he was staying in, but the details are very scant. And unlike the hit on the Hezbollah commander, Fouad Shakur, last night, where Israel very quickly and very firmly claimed responsibility for that assassination, today there was only silence from Israel regarding the killing of Haniyeh. But he has been a marked man since October 7. In the aftermath of that attack, Israel said Hamas leaders were marked for death. But perhaps far more worrying, John, is the location of the attack. It was in Tehran. Now, Haniyeh was a guest of Iran. He was staying in an Iranian Revolutionary Guard guest house. This happened inside the Iranian security bubble, and it's hugely embarrassing for them. And they have said, as you pointed out, it cannot go unpunished. But how much Israel has actually been able to penetrate inside Iran is a question that they're going to be asking themselves.
And Deborah, what are the implications here for the ongoing war between Hamas and Israel?
Well, you know, John, it's a very worrying time indeed, because Israel needed to have something to show for its nearly 10-month-long war in Gaza. It had failed to get Yahya Sinwar, the mastermind of the October 7 attack. It's unclear whether it has killed Mohammed Deif, the senior Hamas commander. And assassinating the head of Hamas's political wing will be a major morale boost for Israel. It's going to be a boon for the very unpopular Benjamin Netanyahu, who leads this country, and it will be a heavy blow to Hamas. In many ways, Haniyeh was really an easy target, though. He was not living underground. He was living freely in Qatar. He traveled all the time. He was regarded really as one of the more pragmatic leaders of Hamas. He was the man who sat in the same room as the Israelis negotiating a hostage deal. And that really is a huge problem. I spoke to a Palestinian activist in the West Bank who said that this kills all hope for a hostage deal, which was already at a stalemate. When you kill the person you are negotiating with, he said, you kill the possibility for peace. So for the families of those hostages, this is going to be a very devastating turn of events. And as for Hamas, you know, it's used to having to replace and promote new leaders in the wake of Israeli assassinations. That's not new. But this is a big loss. This was a globally famous figure who was really key to their relationship with Iran and other allies around the world.
So, Deborah, if there's not going to be a hostage deal, then that means there's not going to be any cessation of hostilities. So how volatile is the situation now that there have been these two assassinations?
Well, John, if we thought things were bad last night when we spoke about this, nobody could have anticipated that they would actually be worse just a few hours later with this second assassination. This was a region that was already in turmoil. The specter of all-out war had already been raised, with tensions escalating with Hezbollah. You already had that assassination of a senior Hezbollah commander. And until now, you know, Iran is really... It's trying to back away. There's been attempts at de-escalation, but they have to be seen to be strong. They probably will respond. They also have their proxies. There's Hezbollah in Lebanon. There are the Houthis in Yemen who have been firing missiles in the Red Sea. The timing and the location, as we said, of Haniyeh's killing means it could be yet another very destabilizing moment in this conflict, which is on the verge of blowing up. Any missteps, any miscalculations, pushing things too far, stopping the escalate, you know, not wanting to de-escalate. This is the kinds of things that are very worrying at the moment. And in many ways, it's more worrying than it's ever been at any point in the nearly 10 months of this conflict.
Deborah Pata for us in East Jerusalem. Thank you. Before Donald Trump was a declared presidential candidate, he rose to prominence in some Republican circles by becoming the chief advocate for the false claim that Barack Obama was not born in the United States. This tactic echoed methods from the Jim Crow era, where individuals were illegitimately discredited due to their race. Trump waded into the same waters Wednesday when asked about his likely opponent in the race for president, Kamala Harris, whose mother was Indian and father is Jamaican. Trump was asked if he agreed with recent attacks from some members in the GOP, claiming Harris will only be on the Democratic ticket because she's black.
Well, I can say, no, I think it's maybe a little bit different. So I've known her a long time indirectly, not directly very much. And she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
Trump spoke at the annual convention for the National Association of Black Journalists, where CBS News campaign reporter Torian Small joins me now. Torian, we heard some laughter there in that clip. What was the reaction like in the room to the former president's comments?
John, the biggest response from the audience was when Trump said those remarks about the ethnicity of the current Vice President of the United States of America. I saw audible gasps. A lot of people had their mouths wide open. This was a shocking moment, and a side of the campaign we haven't quite seen just yet. Donald Trump leaned in, and this was after Rachel Scott, one of the moderators for this event, asked him if it's fair for Republicans to call Kamala Harris a DEI hire or a DEI vice president, potentially a DEI president. And he somehow veered off into this conversation about her hiding her Indian identity to appeal to black voters. This was also his opportunity to speak directly to black voters through this room of black journalists. And I talked to a few folks in the room after this and said that plot was completely lost on them. They saw in their minds someone who was frustrated, annoyed at times, and just downright mean. Karine Jean-Pierre, White House press secretary, also responded to those remarks during today's White House press briefing. She said it was insulting and that Donald Trump John should put respect on Kamala Harris's name.
Torian, how has the GOP base or lawmakers been responding to, because there have been other Republicans have talked about Harris's ethnicity and gender in attacking her as the likely Democratic nominee. From what you're hearing, how's that going over?
Well, timing-wise, what's interesting about this is this comes after a week of both the Trump campaign and his current running mate, J.D. Vance, have been doing a bit of cleanup after Vance's comments from a while ago resurfaced about Kamala Harris being childless and really making disparaging remarks about childless women, calling them cat ladies. So the fact that followed, this event today followed that, I think is telling of where Republicans believe it's fair game to attack the current vice president on her gender and race. I talked to Trump voters and supporters over the past couple of days while I was out on the trail following J.D. Vance, and I talked to them specifically about the cat lady comments. Many of them were unbothered by them largely. There was one supporter who said she would love to see the rhetoric tamped down a bit. She would love to see kindness be reintroduced into presidential politics. But overall, it's playing well with the base. They like when Donald Trump speaks candidly. They like when, they don't pull their punches. So to me, I'm not necessarily seeing Republicans react negatively to attacks like this.
Torian Small, thank you so much. And we'll get an update on the Harris campaign from our Ed O'Keefe later in the show. Turning now to some of the wildfires burning across much of the United States, a new fire is burning in Jefferson County, Colorado. The quarry fire has grown to some 200 acres, and officials say it is growing quickly. Nearly 600 homes have been evacuated. About 130 miles north, crews are trying to put out the Alexander Mountain fire. That one has grown to more than 5,000 acres since Monday. Officials are still trying to determine the cause. And in California, the Park Fire remains a major concern. As of Wednesday evening, it has grown to more than 389,000 acres and is only 18% contained. Our Ben Tracy has been following the developments. Ben?
This is some of the destruction left behind by the Park Fire. There are more than 360 structures that have been destroyed in this massive blaze. It now ranks in the top 5 largest fires in California history, scorching through about 400,000 acres. But a week after it started, by a man who is charged with arson, an army of firefighters seemed to be gaining the upper hand, pushing the worst of the flames away from populated areas. But the firefight is far from over, and it will get harder with temperatures expected to soar above 100 degrees for the next several days. Climate change is making California's summers hotter, and a series of intense heat waves has dried out vegetation across the state, providing fuel for fires like this one to become mega fires. Throughout the West, more than 4 million acres have burned so far this year, and dozens of wildfires continue to rage in several states. John?
Ben Tracy, thank you. The Sangamon Sheriff's Department has released several 911 calls related to the deadly shooting of Sonya Massey earlier this month. We'll listen to that audio and go over the events that led to the shooting and what came after. Plus, the wins keep coming for Team USA. Dana Jacobson will join us again from Paris with an update on swimming, triathlon, and more. You're streaming the Daily Report.
Coming up, our series. Wait a minute. Tom, is that you working the camera?
Keep leaning out of your close-up.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm
choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
That Desired Farm, it's a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
Vice President Kamala Harris is speaking in Houston Wednesday as she also raises money for her presidential campaign under its shortened timeline. Harris also secured a key endorsement from the United Auto Workers Union. In a statement, the union's president said their job is to, quote, defeat Donald Trump and elect Kamala Harris to build on her proven track record of delivering for the working class. Harris is set to rally with UAW members in Detroit next week. And we have our own Ed O'Keefe, White House and political correspondent, with us. He is on the trail with Harris. Hello, Ed. Harris has been to Texas a couple times. I don't think Texas is a battleground. I'm no genius. What's she doing in Texas so much?
Nothing has changed, John. You are correct. It is not a battleground state, but coincidence has brought her here now 3 times in the last month. Last month to address the sorority in Dallas, last week to address the sorority here in Houston, and again tonight for a campaign fundraiser and another boule, as they call it, of a national historically black sorority, plus a campaign fundraiser, all so that she can also attend the funeral tomorrow of the Houston area Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, a longtime collaborator of the vice president and a fellow sister in the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. So she very much wanted to be here, the campaign, realizing it was going to end up in Houston twice in a week, essentially, but made arrangements to do so. And the visit comes, of course, as she's focused on other things like picking a running mate.
And one of the challenges for any competitor against Donald Trump is when to react to him and when not to take the bait that sometimes he's throwing out there to provoke a reaction. With that windup, what are you hearing from the campaign about the former president's remarks about whether she's black or not?
The campaign itself said, quote, the hostility Donald Trump showed on stage today is the same hostility he's shown throughout his life, throughout his term in office, and throughout his campaign. In other words, they're not surprised by what he said today. She is likely to address it tonight, however, when she addresses the sorority. We spoke with some members of it who are going in to see her a little earlier. They were shocked by the cruelness of it, but perhaps not surprised that he would go there. One woman saying even that she would be praying for the former president that he can find a little more light in his life, because it's just so shocking to her that he would do such a thing. You know, you're right. It's going to be tricky for them, and they've anticipated that there would be attacks like this. But given who she's speaking to tonight, an organization of black women, given who he was speaking to today, an organization of black journalists, seems like it's the kind of moment you can't necessarily ignore, but also, frankly, one that might demonstrate to skeptics, to members of her own party, how it is she would take on these personal attacks. He hasn't been this personal yet. It's only been a week or so, but with 97 days to go, there's still plenty of opportunity for similar attacks to be leveled.
Ed, I was struck by two things in listening to the vice president yesterday in Atlanta. The first is a question, which is, how much is Joe Biden a part of her speeches now, as much as it was the first day after she was named? And then the second question is, taking it to her opponent on the issue of immigration, how much will that continue? In other words, not just kissing it off and running over to some other issue, but directly going at Donald Trump on the issue of the border.
She very much took it on last night from the word go by pointing out the fact that as a California attorney general, she visited those tunnels that were buried underneath to connect the two countries, that she prosecuted people who were in drug smuggling or human trafficking. In essence, saying, I have a history with this issue. I tried to find solutions. The former president has not. And then very clearly said that if elected president, she would push for passage of that bipartisan border security and immigration bill that was scuttled earlier this year by the former president and Republicans, despite the fact that there were a handful of Republicans negotiating with Democrats in the White House. So that puts her on the record now, in essence, embracing a Biden administration policy or a Biden administration push to address the issue that the president and the vice president have both pointed out Republicans then tried to kill. As for Joe Biden, no mention of him last night by the vice president. Very little mention of him by others who spoke before the vice president. And those we spoke to that were in the crowd made clear, big supporters of him, appreciative of the service he's given to the country, grateful for his decision to step down, but also signaled they wouldn't have necessarily stood in a hot line all day long to see him. Even if they would have voted for him in November, they were very excited to see her. And that is a vibe, that is an expectation that her campaign now has, that this is very much about the future. And as they chant at her rallies now, that they don't want to go back. They don't necessarily want to focus on that. They want to find a way to look forward.
Ed O'Keefe in Houston. Thank you so much, Ed. As Ed was just discussing, news about the Democratic National Convention in Chicago is rolling out. And per Ed's remarks, on opening night, President Biden is expected to give a primetime speech. That's according to two sources familiar with the event's plannings. One source tells CBS News there will also be a, quote, big tribute for the president on that kickoff night. But it's the kickoff night because then events will focus on his vice president, Kamala Harris. The DNC runs August 19th through the 22nd, 4 weeks after Biden dropped out of the race for president. Members of Congress are about to disappear for the August recess. They will have a lot of work to do when they return in September. They're way behind on the appropriations process that funds government. The Republican-controlled House has only passed 5 of the dozen appropriations bills. The Senate Appropriations Committee has advanced 7 spending measures with overwhelming bipartisan support, but none of those have moved on to the floor of the democratically controlled Senate for a final vote. So by the time lawmakers return to their offices in Washington, they will only have a few weeks to figure out how to avert a government shutdown by the end of September. 2 years ago, a Missouri woman says the University of Kansas health system denied her an emergency abortion. Now she's suing them over the matter. Melissa Farmer went to the emergency room after her water broke after just 18 weeks of pregnancy. By the time she made it to the ER, her pregnancy was no longer viable because most of the fluid in her amniotic sac was gone. Court documents say Farmer sought an emergency abortion, which was legal under state and federal law at the time, but hospital staff allegedly denied her the treatment, going so far as to not take her temperature and vital signs. Boar's Head is recalling 7 million pounds of meat Tuesday after its products were linked to a listeria outbreak. It's left 2 people dead and 3 dozen sick. The latest recall includes all of the meat and poultry products produced in Boar's Head's Virginia facility. This comes after the U.S. Department of Agriculture found that a sample of the company's liverwurst matched the strain in the nationwide outbreak. 200,000 pounds of meat were initially recalled by Boar's Head last Friday. The Federal Reserve is leaving interest rates unchanged, with inflation cooling. Why is the central bank keeping rates at their highest point in 23 years? We'll discuss. You're streaming The Daily Report.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team. Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate.
Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes. Did you ever have these problems before the derailment? No, ma'am. This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing, bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else. This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
You can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
Sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to the Daily Report. I'm John Dickerson. Here are some additions to our top stories. Christopher Dunn was released from prison Tuesday after 34 years behind bars for a crime he did not commit. A Missouri judge overturned Dunn's murder conviction in a 1990 shooting of a 15-year-old, citing unspecified new evidence. Upon his release, Dunn said he never gave up because his family never gave up. Delta Airlines CEO Ed Bastian says the global IT outage sparked by the botched CrowdStrike software update will cost the company $500 million. Delta was forced to cancel thousands of flights and failed to recover as quickly as other airlines did, prompting a federal investigation. Iranian and Hamas officials say the militant group's political leader, Ismail Haniyeh, was assassinated in Iran after attending the presidential inauguration. Both are blaming Israel for the strike. The attack is intensifying concerns over a wider conflict in the Middle East. And joining us now is Seth Jones. He's director of the Center for Strategic and International Studies Security Program. Seth, thank you for being with us. How does this assassination and the killing of a Hezbollah commander in Lebanon make this already shaky situation even more shaky?
Well, I think the reality is that Israel, Hezbollah, and Iran more broadly are very steadily climbing the escalation ladder. There have already been thousands of strikes on both sides of the Israel-Lebanon border between Israel and Hezbollah. The killing of children earlier this week on a soccer pitch in the Golan Heights led to the Israeli strike against a Hezbollah leader in the Beirut area. So what we're seeing is the war starting to expand, not just in number of strikes, but also in locations. Iran has been hit in the last 48 hours, as has Beirut. So it's concerning really in a whole range of ways.
When the escalation ladder, as you put it, started to be climbed before and Israel retaliated against an Iranian attack, President Biden was asked about what his message to Iran was, and he said, don't. And that seemed to kind of break the circuit. They did not continue escalation. Does the U.S. have a role here? Can it send a message to try to get in the way of that escalation ladder continuing?
The U.S. does have a role. I do think it's limited. I actually think the U.S.'s biggest role is not on the military side. The U.S. has deployed carrier strike groups, for example, to the region. I think it's diplomatic here. The biggest issue at the core of the Hezbollah-Israel disagreement is about Hezbollah operating south of the Litani River, north of what's called the Blue Line around the Israeli-Lebanese border, and firing things like anti-tank guided munitions. There are diplomatic discussions going on right now to push Hezbollah further north. If they're successful, we don't have big war. If they aren't successful, that's where I'm particularly concerned that this inches towards a broader, full-scale war between Israel and Hezbollah and has regional implications.
Now, you mentioned diplomacy. Haniyeh was a key player in the ceasefire hostage negotiations. Hamas now says there's no more, that's over. Now, we don't know, but what's your assessment of how those talks continue if one of the interlocutors has now been killed by a missile?
Well, there are two sets of talks. One is the Gaza talks, and that's where Hamas comes in. The other are the Hezbollah talks, which are also ongoing. I think for the moment, frankly, a ceasefire discussion anyway, the Israelis have never really been that interested in. But I don't think we're going to see a major ceasefire breakthrough between Israel and Hamas. I think what we will see is the Israelis try to wrap up most of their operations as quickly as they can in Gaza. Where I think the diplomatic discussions are most useful, and I think where a lot more is at stake, frankly, is in and around Lebanon. And that is still, those are still ongoing negotiations right now.
Seth Jones with the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Thank you so much, Seth.
Thank you.
Now to the tragedy of Sonya Massey. In early July, the 36-year-old called 911, reporting a possible prowler. A sheriff's deputy sent to protect her instead shot her. The Sangamon County Sheriff's Department has now released several 911 calls related to the case, and here is some of the audio from those calls.
The mental people told me to call 911 because I don't want you guys to hurt her, please. Please don't send no combative policemen that are prejudiced, please. They're scary. I'm scared of the police.
I keep hearing stuff on the outside of my house, and it sounds like somebody was banging on the side of my house. I don't know. Could y'all come and see?
And Anna Schechter joins us now. She's CBS News' senior coordinating producer for crime and public safety. Anna, it's so hard to hear those knowing the outcome. Give us the sense of the timeline and the events from this shooting.
So at 9:09 a.m., her mother placed a call to 911 asking for help for her daughter. She was clearly having what she called a paranoid schizophrenic episode. And she was worried about her daughter. But as you heard in the clip, she's worried that officers coming might misinterpret what's going on and might actually hurt her. And so that is so incredibly chilling to listen to. She was begging them, don't send someone who's going to hurt my daughter. And so just that foreshadow, you know, when we think about what ultimately happened, it's just heartbreaking. Around 1 p.m. that day, Sonya Massey made a couple more calls to 911. She was clearly disoriented. She was having an episode. And then late that night, around 1 a.m., that's when we just heard that call. She believed she heard a prowler at her house, and she called. And then we have Sean Grayson and his partner arrive at her home. We've seen that video where they enter her home. In fact, it's interesting. One of the calls released, we heard 911 call her back and check on her. And she says, the sheriff's department is here. And the dispatcher says, okay, I'm going to let you go. And she said, no, 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 please. I thought you were going to come. The sheriff's department's going to come. Like, hold on with me. Yeah. And that call then drops. And that's chilling. And we know that that's just minutes before she's shot.
When she was shot, was it clear that the officer had, what did the first responders think had happened?
Initially, we hear on the radio the first responders and even Illinois State Police saying, well, we've heard that this was a self-inflicted gunshot wound. So initially, the operating theory was she had shot herself. And in fact, the Massey family told us that they were initially told that she had shot herself. And only hours later were they ultimately told that a deputy had shot her.
Anna Schechter, thank you so much. As expected, the Federal Reserve is leaving its benchmark interest rate unchanged. This is a good indication that the previous 11 hikes are doing their job in slowing inflation. While there weren't any cuts Wednesday, Fed Chair Jerome Powell said during a press conference that a rate cut could be, quote, on the table at the central bank's next meeting in September. The Fed's decision means policymakers will hold the federal funds rate in a range between 5.25 to 5.5%. That's its highest level in 23 years. For more on this, I want to bring in Martin Bakkerdax. He's a senior editor-in-chief markets correspondent for The Street. Martin, it's good to be with you again. Some policy experts believe the Fed has already waited too long to cut rates, which has affected the lower and middle income part of the income scale. What's the consensus on that? Have they waited too long, or is that just one opinion among many?
I think it's the Coke versus Pepsi debate of financial markets right now, John, to be perfectly honest. There's a lot of discussion as to whether or not you can make the argument that it should have gone today, and whether you could make the argument that going in September makes no difference whatsoever. I think the balance of thought is that they may have left it a little bit too late, but they were so stung by the transitory inflation mistake that they made just after COVID, where they thought some of those price increases were going to recede very quickly, that I just think the Fed wants to be terribly careful right now, make absolutely sure that the data is moving sustainably in the direction that they want, and then they will move afterwards.
Martin, do you think that sense of care, which Jerome Powell demonstrates with every choice of the words that he uses, will extend to how large of a rate cut they might employ in September if they were to do that? In other words, a quarter, or could it go all the way to the half? Do we have a sense of what is on the table now that Powell has put it on the table?
Well, I think you're absolutely right to point to that, John. And I think it was interesting to me that Powell actually addressed that question almost directly in his press conference today with the media. He did say that 50 basis points wasn't something they were thinking about right now. In other words, they're probably going to want to lower rates by 1/4 of a point each time, probably again to make sure that the data is moving in the right direction and that they don't move too quickly. But there is a sustainable part of the market right now, I should say a growing plurality, that thinks that the Fed might have to move more quickly and catch up as a result of them perhaps lingering a little bit too long. So I wouldn't take 50 off the table, but I was struck, and to your point, that he was less careful in addressing that than he might ordinarily have been.
And what has the market reaction been, to the extent that we can divine a unified reaction from market behavior? But how has this all been interpreted by the people who watch this like a hawk?
Reasonably bullish, I would have to say, John, and I wondered very quickly how that will play out into consumer lending markets as well. The benchmark U.S. Treasury bond yield, the 10-year maturity, is the one that most of us should look at to sort of discern where we're going to see changes in mortgage rates and credit cards and all sorts of other things. And that's moving sustainably and quickly lower now as a result of the messaging that we got from the Fed today. So I do think we'll see that play out in mortgage rates, and they certainly need a lot of help. It will be slower, I think, John, to filter into the broader consumer economy. And I think that's going to be the most concerning aspect for Fed officials and indeed politicians going into the election cycle, because we are still looking at food price inflation that's some 22% higher than it was prior to the pandemic. And I think this is very important, John, and hopefully you give me some rope here. Inflation is a rate of change and not a level. So even though inflation is slowing, that's a rate of change that is slowing rather than the level. The level of absolute prices is still much higher than it was, and that's having a significant impact on the economy, particularly now that Americans are seeing those pandemic-era savings recede as a result of, in part, those high prices.
And that rate's not, while the rate may slow, those price rises are, it's not so, it doesn't traditionally happen that then prices will suddenly go back down. So they're kind of at least stuck at where they were.
I think that's absolutely right. We are seeing some consumer pushback, and I think this is really important. McDonald's, for instance, introduced that $5 value meal just a few weeks ago. It sounds a bit funny, but it's really important. This is the biggest restaurant group in the world, and they actually saw increased traffic as a result. They had to introduce that meal deal because consumers were pushing back on high prices and not boycotting the restaurants, but they were seeing store traffic fall significantly. We're seeing that in Starbucks. We're seeing it in a lot of other companies. Costco had to wait 7 years to increase its membership fee because it didn't want to burden its customers with higher costs whilst they were also battling inflation. So I think that consumer pushback is causing some recession in terms of consumer prices, but you're absolutely right. It takes much longer than it does for the Fed to lower rates.
And unfortunately, we're out of time. But next time when we talk, we'll talk about the way in which those prices are operating differently for the people at the very top range versus the bottom, because the top is still spending like mad. But
you're absolutely right. The top is spending like mad because they're earning so much on their savings because rates are so high.
Precisely right. Martin Bakkerdax, always a pleasure with The Street. Thank you so much, Martin.
Thanks, Tom.
Coming up, Venezuela's president has called for an audit of the recent election results after days of protests, but some groups are still worried about the transparency of the process. We'll explain. You're streaming The Daily Report.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail. What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party? Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now?
That are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides on CBS News 24/7.
Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7. That is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable.
The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro asked the country's Supreme Court to complete an audit of the weekend's highly contested presidential election. But the court's close ties to Maduro have some questioning how transparent and legitimate such a review would be. Lilia Luciano has the latest from Caracas.
John, good evening. As tensions continue to rise, not just here in Caracas and all across Venezuela, but around the world, we're hearing much heated rhetoric from the government of Venezuela. The president of the National Assembly, and the Attorney General are all calling for the arrest of Maria Corina Machado, the leader of the opposition, and for the candidate who the opposition considers the president-elect, Edmundo González Urrutia. The government blames them of inciting violence, leading to hundreds of arrests and many deaths over the course of all of this week. There's also calls internationally from people saying this was not a democratic election. That includes the members of the Carter Center. There were 18 of them here in Venezuela observing the election on Sunday. They all concluded, not while being here in the country, but after leaving the country when they revealed the results of their observations, that this could not be considered a democratic election. Also, other leaders, including President Maduro's, one of his closest allies in the region, Gustavo Petro, who has been extremely supportive of Maduro and the regime over years, came out today to say that there must be a vote count, that the election, that all of the paper tallies and all of the official results must be counting, including every political force in the country. That, of course, includes the opposition and international observers. John.
Lilia Luciano in Caracas, Venezuela. Thank you. Both the men's and women's Olympic triathlon events proceeded with swimming in the Seine River after the water's pollution levels caused a delay. And for the U.S., after surpassing a 3,000 total Olympic medal goal on Tuesday, Team USA has continued to rack up the wins. As of Wednesday evening, the U.S. has won 30 medals in the 2024 Games, with France following behind at 26. Dana Jacobson has been following all of this from Paris and joins us. She's the co-host of CBS Saturday Morning and a CBS News and sports correspondent. Dana, it's nice for the French that they come in at least second in their own games. But let me ask you about the triathlon. How did that go? We talked about it so much. They got in. How did it go? And are they worried it's going to, repeat on them later?
Well, let's say this. The French won, at least for the women, in the triathlon. They did. They got the water testing was fine. Also, the current, which had been a little bit of a concern, that was fine. So they were able to do the women's event starting at 8 a.m. and the men's followed. It was really a sight to behold. The only shift really they had to have in the course was to allow swimmers to swim a little closer to the right side of the bank, the right bank. So for organizers, it was a huge sigh of relief and just a wonderful moment for them. That marathon swim that they have to worry about is late next week. Not a lot of rain right now in the forecast, which I know you're an expert like me now. We know rain becomes the problem, so hopefully they will be okay here.
And remind people super quickly why rain becomes the problem.
Yeah, so this is because once that rainwater goes, all the wastewater and the sewer water gets into this river, and that's the contamination problem. Even with the filtration system they have, it just overwhelms it. It just isn't enough to keep up with that.
Katie Ledecky, who just gets in the pool and wins, did that again. What happened with her?
1,500 meters. It's her signature event. I kind of started looking around to figure out perspective. She's 27. She hasn't lost in this event, from what I could find, since she was 13 years old. So that is perspective. Also, 27 years old, Simone Biles' age. It's the year of the 27-year-old, apparently, at the Olympics. But for Katie Ledecky, it's her 8th gold here at for the Olympic Games that she's been in. It's her 12th overall medal, so she is now tied with Jenny Thompson for the most medals for an American woman at the Olympics. Her time, which is an Olympic record, 7 seconds better, more than 7 seconds better than what she set in Tokyo. It's also the 8th best time in the event overall at any type of outlet. She has all top 10 in that. So that kind of explains her dominance. She'll be swimming in more events and more medals to add to the tally, I'm sure.
And Dana, Britain's women's quadruple sculls rowing, they took home a gold medal Wednesday. Tell us more about that and the emotional significance for one of the athletes of that victory.
Yeah, I mean, we forget sometimes. It is more than just the U.S. team that we should be talking about here, because some amazing stories. First of all, find the finish online. A photo finish, it won't do it justice just to see the photo. Go find it. If you've seen Boys in the Boat recently, it's reminiscent of that in some ways. So go watch that. You'll see an incredible finish. One of the young women who is rowing for Team Great Britain, and it was their first win in this event ever, Lola Anderson, and she's what they call a baby of the London Games because she was watching the London Games and got inspired. Back then, when she was a kid, she wrote this down on a piece of paper. My name is Lola Anderson, and I think it would be my biggest dream in life to go to the Olympics in rowing and, if possible, win a gold for Great Britain. Well, apparently, she threw that piece of paper away, but her father, who's a former rower, he picked it out of the garbage. He kept it for about 7 years. He only gave it back to her when he was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and he wanted to remind her of her dreams. Now, this is a story that people in Great Britain had heard about. So after the race, once she had her medal, she was talking to a few of the reporters there, and they asked her what the moment was like, and obviously very tearful. She said she was thinking of her dad, especially when you think about that moment of him helping her hold on to that piece of paper, which she still has now, thanks to him.
Dana Jacobson, thank you for doing that to me. Thank you. That was great, Dana. Thank you.
See, I told you. Thanks.
Thanks, Dana. Still to come, higher temperatures mean increasing air conditioning use. We'll break down how worldwide heat waves are affecting the industry. You're streaming the Daily Report.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more. Experience thought-provoking.
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
Innovative and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence. 90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns. But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Nations are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my 2 good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
A CBS News investigation.
people looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
The clock is ticking for TikTok as the popular video app will be removed from congressional staffers' government phones in a few weeks. A memo sent out to staff reportedly said the Office of the Chief Administrative Officer would begin blocking and removing TikTok from House devices August 15th. The office already asked people to delete the app nearly 2 years ago, but it's taking things a step further by outright removing it now. It's the latest development in TikTok's legal battle with the United States over its Chinese parent company, ByteDance. In March 2023, TikTok's CEO downplayed national security concerns of members of Congress during testimony on Capitol Hill. This past April, President Biden signed a bill that would ban TikTok nationwide unless ByteDance sold it within a year. Then, less than a month later, TikTok sued the U.S. government over the bill, arguing it violates users' First Amendment rights to free speech. TikTok's lawsuit could delay the ban while this matter plays out in court. As temperatures rise around the world, the air conditioning industry is reaping the benefits. According to a new report, the market for air conditioning has grown at a 7% rate worldwide over the past decade. While the heat brings profits to air conditioning installers, it also brings increased demand, emergency calls, and longer workdays. HVAC companies are also struggling with supply chain backups and new requirements from the EPA. The agency is also looking to curb the use of non-eco-friendly refrigerants, a key component used in HVAC systems. Here's a look at some of the stories we're covering in our next hour. A new wave of security against former President Trump after he baselessly questions Vice President Harris's race on stage. We'll have a report from the NABJ in Chicago. Plus, newly obtained 911 audio tells us more about the moments leading up to the fatal shooting of Sonya Massey. And multiple wildfires continue to scorch hundreds of thousands of acres across the U.S. The latest on where efforts to fight the blazes stand. You're streaming CBS News.
Okay, so let's just start at the beginning.
Well, let me start with this. What is at stake here?
What is the answer then?
Do you know why?
You want me to just keep going?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Were there death threats?
How is this possible?
What's wrong with that argument?
Are you saying they lied?
Have you told the government?